Hello, I'm Dr. Kevin Calloway, and welcome to our third video. In our first video, we talked about chronic pain, what it felt like to live and work with chronic pain, and how that affected on-the-job performance and your behavior at the workplace. In the second video, we talked about the characteristics of effective leadership, and in particular, we focused on transformational leadership and the 4 I's: idealized influence, being a role model; inspirational motivation, raising people's expectations of what they can accomplish; intellectual stimulation, getting people to think about old problems in new ways; and finally, individualized consideration, focusing on people as people, spending time with them, coaching, mentoring, getting to know them. In this last video, I'd like to bring these two perspectives together. And in particular, we want to focus on how we can put those leadership skills to work. So before we plunge into that, let's take a step back, and we need to be clear that there is a legal duty to accommodate. In Canada, this is under the Human Rights Act. In the United States, under the Americans with Disabilities Act, and virtually every country, every jurisdiction has some legislation that imposes a duty to accommodate. And it's usually phrased, the duty to accommodate employees with disabilities to the point of undue hardship. And at least in Canada, the courts have generally said that's a very high bar. So this is not a question of whether we should accommodate or should we consider this or whatever. There is a legal obligation to do this. And by accommodation, we mean changing the workplace rules or practices, conditions, requirements, virtually any aspect of the workplace that if we just applied, the same rules to everybody, it's going to disadvantage some people with disabilities. And maybe we can change those rules or alter the conditions, alter the design of the workplace so that it's more amenable for that individual. And indeed, it might even help all employees. Employers, of course, don't have to go into this blind. They can certainly ask for information about the disability relative to the request for accommodation, and employees have some obligation to provide that information to employers so that they can make informed decisions. But that's important to note that we do have a legal obligation here to consider accommodations. Beyond that, I think in the workplace, we can look at sort of 3 approaches to preventing disability due to chronic pain. So yes, the individual might experience chronic pain, but that's not necessarily a disability, and it doesn't necessarily stop them from engaging in workplace behaviors in the normal sort of workplace activities. And maybe we can do things to stop that chronic pain from becoming a disabling condition. So we can talk about primary prevention, which is really eliminating the root cause of the disability. So we can modify the work environment, we can remove lifting. I talked earlier in the second video about storing stock at waist level rather than putting it on the floor to prevent bending, things like that. Maybe it's ergonomic furniture we need, or a change in work schedules, or whatever. Whatever we do to eliminate factors that are increasing the risk for individuals with chronic pain. And that may be good practice for all of us. We found in many contexts this notion of universal design. That is, if you design the workplace for individuals with disabilities, it actually becomes a better workplace for all of us. So we talked earlier about the role of flexibility in helping employees with chronic pain. Flexibility is good for all of us. It's not just people who have a particular condition or disability. It, in fact, makes it a better workplace for all of us. So it's just good practice. We can also talk about secondary prevention, and that's dealing with the disability when it manifests. So how do you help people who are experiencing chronic pain, whether that's to do with the workplace or not? How do you help people deal with the day-to-day? And we talked about the roles of support and how important it is to have supportive managers, supportive colleagues. And we also just finished talking about accommodations and the need for accommodations. And finally, we have tertiary prevention, which is really dealing with the sort of end state here. And that's mainly in organizations through our benefit packages and through health initiatives so that we can provide people access to rehabilitation, to whatever therapies or medications they need. But it can go beyond that and be engaged in health programs as well. So leaders have a couple of different approaches they can take. I think, you know, beyond transformational leadership that we're going to talk about, we can think about, you know, there is a legal approach in organizations, which is recognizing the duty to accommodate and the responsibilities of the parties here to make accommodations. There is a human factors approach that will focus on the physical design of the workplace. And most of us are used to, especially for office workers, used to having ergonomic furniture, you know, adjustable desks and adjustable chairs and all that. There's an interesting study from a couple of years ago suggesting that that approach can be limited because many of us get, you know, these really ergonomic chairs that you can adjust everything, but we never actually adjust them. So unless you take advantage of the adjustments, they're not going to help much. But when you do, you can create a more comfortable environment for yourself. Go beyond just the physical design of the workplace. There's also sort of a job design approach where we can look at the tasks. And again, these are back to that notion of universal design. When we design jobs according to the job design approach, incorporating these 5 characteristics, we create better jobs that people enjoy, jobs that people are motivated to do. And this is true for all of us. And classically, the 5 characteristics we talk about is, you know, what's good work? Good work is a job that gives us autonomy, gives us a sense of control. That's actually pretty central to our self-concept as adults. You know, that's one of the defining things about being an adult is you're in control. You have some autonomy. So the more decision-making we can give to people, the more control over the work they do, the better off they are. Jobs that use a variety of skills tend to be better jobs. Rather than doing one thing over and over again, jobs that incorporate a variety of skills. When you're doing things that are important to other people and you recognize the impact that your job is having on other people, that tends to create a better job, right? We call that task significance, but it's really what I do in my work affects other people, and I recognize that effect. Task identity is to recognize the role of my job in the broader system, how my job contributes to whatever else is going on in the organization. And finally, jobs that provide feedback, that tell me how well I'm doing. So, you know, if I always say when I'm teaching my classes and I see students' heads start to nod as they fall asleep, that's instant feedback on how well I'm doing as a lecturer. And it's not always pleasant feedback, but if we can build jobs so it incorporates that kind of feedback so that you know how well you're doing, that tends to be a more motivating and satisfying environment. And leaders can also focus on the psychosocial environment, the psychosocial approach, which is really about creating a positive social environment in the workplace. And that's, I think, where the leaders, the other approaches, legal, human factors, ergonomics, job design, are at a bigger scale, sort of organizational policy. But I think individual leaders, no matter at what level, that's where they can have the greatest effect, is on creating a positive social environment. So let's talk about how we can apply those 4 I's of transformational leadership on a daily basis, certainly to help employees who are living with chronic pain, but also works for all employees. It just makes you a better leader, right? So what can we do to demonstrate idealized influence? I think one important thing that leaders can do is to talk about and model. So you have to live up to what you say, but talk about and model the idea that every employee is valuable. Every employee has a contribution to make, right? And we're going to do whatever we can do to help employees make that contribution, right? Make it clear that you see your own role as supporting employees, right? To achieve the best results. So talking about your values, you think it's important that every employee gets to contribute, and then putting that into action. I think part of that is checking in with employees fairly frequently to see if they have what they need. It doesn't take much time to check in with employees and say, how's it going? Do you need anything from me? Or I just want to, is there anything we can do to help you? Anything we can do to make it better for you today? That's as true for employees living with chronic pain as it's true for all employees, but maybe especially true when employees are struggling, when they're experiencing, say, a bout of chronic pain where they're having a hard time meeting their goals. That's a good time to hear, is there anything I can do to help you? Is there anything we can do to make it easier for you? So very practical things that we can do to demonstrate that leadership characteristic of idealized influence. Inspirational motivation, it's a matter of being positive, using praise and recognition whenever possible. One of the things I always say in leadership training is the single best thing you can do as a leader is tell 5 people a day that they're doing a good job. Now, there's some conditions around that. You can't lie, so you have to find 5 people a day who are doing something good. It can't be the same 5 people every day. You got to spread it around a little bit. But it's a very neat thing. And I've had many leaders try this, and they all tell me the same thing. It changes your perspective on the workplace, because now you're actively looking for those positive examples that you can reward or recognize, and it changes how you see the workplace. You're not looking for mistakes and errors. Again, asking employees, checking in with them, how can I help you succeed? Recognizing really that all employees have good days and bad days, and neither one of those characterizes their whole experience, right? If you have a bad day, it doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make you a bad employee. It means you had a bad day, right? So not making that a characteristic of the person, but focusing on, okay, tomorrow will be better. What can we do to make it better the next time? The more you can say, I know you can do this, I know you're good at this, the more you can communicate that, I know you're a good employee, I value your contributions. That's how you create that positive environment for individuals. For intellectual stimulation, I've said this before, but a lot of that is rooted in questioning and not accepting the status quo. So for employees who are living with chronic pain, I think you want to think about the notion of supportively challenging people. So you want to maybe challenge some of the beliefs that I just can't do this, or because of my condition, I can't do that. You don't want to directly confront people or deny their own experience, but you can switch that conversation to, how can I do this, right? What do I need to make this happen? So instead of accepting the limitation, trying to find ways to work around that, or to supplement, or there are additional resources you need, or what do we need to do to make this happen? This can be, a schedule change. It can be additional equipment, whatever it is. But if we think creatively, we can also often find solutions. Years ago, I did some work with an organization, and one of their employees had a chronic condition. It wasn't chronic pain, but another chronic condition. for which she took medication, and the medication would make her sleepy in the afternoons to the point where she physically could not stay awake. And she had a very good supervisor, and they talked it through. And what they worked out was that she would come to work every day as normal. She would work from 9 till about 2 in the afternoon, and then she would go home. And she'd go home and take a nap or whatever. And then in the evenings at home, she would put in another 2 or 3 hours, and they would monitor the work output. The work had to get done. They both agreed on that. But just that little shift in schedule of allowing her to leave early so she could accommodate the physical need, the drowsiness from the medication. And then she was perfectly willing to come back and put the additional hours in to make up the day, and make sure that the work got done. So she got what she needed, the organization got what they needed, creative solution, because they sat down and asked, how can we make this happen? How can we make this work for both people? A lot of that's around challenging old ideas, especially that notion we've always done it this way. Some things we just don't think about because we've always done it that way. So that's the way we do it. And when we have to start thinking differently, it's when somebody, for whatever reason, cannot do it the way we always do it. And maybe there's another way to do it. So we've always worked 8 hours days, but if somebody can't do that, maybe there's another way, a way we can accommodate that and still get what we need. So it's just that notion of continually challenging. What do you need? How can we make this work? How can we make this work for both of us, both the organization and the individual? That's intellectual stimulation. And finally, individualized consideration is paying attention to individuals, right? As people, not just as employees. But there are some other work I've done with a colleague, Jennifer Dimhoff. There were often signs that when somebody is in crisis, when someone has something going on in their life, whether it's chronic pain or relationship breaking down or whatever it is that's going on in their life, there are signs we can identify that to tell us, it wouldn't tell us what's happening, but it'll tell us something is going on. And as leaders, that's where we might want to intervene. So it's sort of cues to recognition that something is going on. And some of them very simple are one is expressions of stress. People will talk about being stressed, right? They might not tell you why, but they will tell you that they're really stressed out. And they talk about it in conversations with other people. People withdraw socially. So we often think of withdrawal as absenteeism or something, and that's not what I'm talking about. I mean, somebody who always used to go for coffee with the gang suddenly stops going for coffee. Someone who always went out for drinks after work with the gang, now they don't go. Or they always went to lunch and now they don't go. That can indicate that something's going on for people, that they're struggling with something. Now, if somebody never did that, they're an introvert. That doesn't mean anything's the matter. But if they used to be more social and now they're not, that's sometimes a sign that something is going on. Mood changes and outbursts. It's sort of like, for any of us, when we're under a lot of stress, we get cranky at people. And sometimes that results in people acting out. Sometimes it's emotional displays like crying or something like that. That's sort of out of context to the behavior or to the situation, and might suggest that something else is going on for other people. Declines in performance, people who are always on time with reports, now they're not on time, or the work isn't done as well. And at the very extreme, people who engage in extreme behaviors, they threaten other people, they threaten to harm themselves. That's an obvious, very clear sign, fairly rare, but not unheard of, but rarer than the other ones. But all those signs are signs that something is going on with people. And that would be the time to check in with, how's it going? Is there anything you need? Is there anything I can do to help you? On a regular basis. And again, I always stress it's check in, not check up on. So you're not monitoring them. You're just making a point to check in to find out how things are going. and taking that time to resolve problems, discuss concerns, and work through issues with people. And that's focusing on the individual. So at the end of the day, we have to recognize, what we can and can't do. And leader, as a leader, you're not going to change somebody's medical condition. You're not going to change their biological experience of pain. You can maybe minimize the extent to which that pain translates into a disability. Right? A disability is when you're unable to do something because of whatever condition you have. But as a leader, you can work with that individual, find other ways that enable them to do it. And now they might have the chronic pain, but they don't have the disability. Creating that positive psychosocial environment, engaging in those 4 I's of transformational leadership. This is all, good leadership. And just as importantly, it's good business practice. And I wish you the greatest success with it. Thank you.